In a previous video, I increased the resaw capacity on my Harbor Freight bandsaw using a modified riser kit that I ordered from Grizzly. So the only thing really left to do is to install a fence system on this bandsaw. And since the Kreg fence system is very expensive and Harbor Freight does not sell a fence system for this, I made my own. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I did it. I began by ripping some 2-inch and some 1-inch strips on the table saw. These will form the fence rails. I then cross-cut the rails down to 20 inches on the radial arm saw. It was then time to assemble the rails by just applying some wood glue and tacking them with the pin nailer. I then lined the rail up with the table of the bandsaw and started marking where I could put holes to attach the rail. I then went over to the drill press to drill the holes in the rail. I used a Forstner bit to inset the hole and then just used a 1/4-inch drill bit to provide clearance for the bolts I will be using. This rail system will require me to drill into the tabletop of the bandsaw, so I clamped everything in place and then used a center punch to mark where my holes would be on the table, and then just used a lot of oil and a nice new drill bit to drill through the cast iron. Cast iron is very easy to drill through, so it's a good metal if you have to drill through metal. I'm not using through bolts for this rail system, so I am tapping each of the holes with a 1/4-20 tap. Cast iron is incredibly easy to tap, so you just use enough oil and just go slow, and it goes really easily. I could then attach my rails with some 1/4-20 bolts. Here I am just gluing and tacking some cleats that the extension table will sit on. It was then back to the table saw to start cutting out the pieces for the extension table. The extension table is just going to be made out of 2 pieces of stacked plywood, so I cross-cut it down to the correct dimension on the radial arm saw. And then I put it in place on the bandsaw and mark where I need to cut the rabbet on each end to make it slot in cleanly. And then it's back to the table saw to cut the rabbet. I just made multiple passes on the full kerf blade. I didn't really feel like setting up the dado stack for essentially 2 cuts. It was a perfect fit, so then I just glued it together and drove some tacks just to hold it together while the glue dried. We've made some real progress with this, so I wanted to make sure that this was removable. That way I don't need to take the whole fence apart to replace a blade. So this will just slide back in, and it is perfectly flush, so I'm really happy with it. Now I need to figure out the actual fence. I gave myself a lip on each side, so hopefully I can just build a fence that will clamp just by either screwing a knob or a lever. So, onto that. Up until this point, I did not have a set plan for what the fence locking mechanism would be, but I knew that no matter how the fence was to lock, it would have the same back end, which would just be a hook that loops around the rail. So I started first by doing that. I decided not to use glue to attach the back cleat, instead to use a mechanical connection. I thought that that might work better for the fence system. In retrospect, I don't know if it made any difference at all. I put some painter's tape on the front rail to create a little bit of a spacer. That way I could set everything tight, and once I took the tape away, the fence would glide nicely back and forth. By this point, I had decided that I was going to use a carriage bolt and a T-nut to lock the fence in place. So I took a 3x3 block and just marked where my carriage bolt would be passing through it, and then went over to the drill press to drill out a hole large enough for the T-nut, and then inset the T-nut using a Forstner bit, and then drove the T-nut into the block with a hammer. I could then run the carriage bolt through the block and start assembling the front end of the fence using glue, screws, and pin nails, completely abandoning the purely mechanical fastener strategy I took on the back end of the fence. I did my best to beef up the front end of the fence. I didn't notice any warping or anything as I tightened the carriage bolt, but I didn't want to chance anything. My fence mechanism is now complete and working. It's very simple. I just turn this carriage bolt, it pushes into the rail of the fence and locks it in place, pulling the back fence against it. So now I'm going to take everything apart and sand everything down, and then I can beef up this fence and put on my auxiliary fence. I have a 6-inch piece that will be the auxiliary fence for this. And then it's all done. I then sanded everything smooth, starting with 150 grit sandpaper and then finishing with 220. Once that was complete, I hit everything with a coat of boiled linseed oil before coating everything in paste wax and buffing it all smooth. I decided that the easiest way to add some heft to the fence and to allow an auxiliary fence to be attached would just be to add more layers of plywood. So I just added a few more strips on top, and that gave me my mounting point for the auxiliary fence. I grabbed a random flyer to use as a spacer when attaching the auxiliary fence. That way the fence would not be riding directly on the tabletop, instead be sitting about a 1/16 of an inch above the tabletop when the fence is in use. It is then just a simple matter of driving in 5 screws, and then this fence is done and functional. With these upgrades, this is now a very capable bandsaw, and I'm actually very excited to start using it to resaw some logs I have in the backyard. Okay, and at least for now, it's all done. It's a completely usable fence system now. I'm going to turn a knob and stuff on the lathe for this so that it's a little bit sturdier of a knob, but overall, it's completely functional. It slides nice and cleanly, and I'm very happy with it. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to keep up to date with new projects as they are released. And until next time, thank you.